Hi everybody, I'm good to go and I hope you guys are too, because today I'm talking about something that's very near and dear to my heart. That's right, I'm talking about comic books. More specifically, a comic book storyline that got me into comics to begin with. So just imagine this. My dad walks into my room when I'm like 8 years old and he says, "Get in the car, I want to take you somewhere real cool." So 8-year-old me and my dad, who says he doesn't want to be put in the public eye, so I guess I'll just use Lionel Richie, drive all the way down to Baltimore and he takes me down to his local comic book shop that he went to when he was growing up. And he says, no, that's not it. "Marcus, I want you to go run around and find a character that you like, and I'll buy you the whole story for him." And that I did. I ran around, and I saw the normal ones, Spider-Man, Superman, but then I stumbled upon him, the Holy Grail, Space Ghost. And I knew that I wanted this comic as soon as I opened it up and read the first line. Here's exactly what the first line says. It says, "You have the right to live in peace." And 8-year-old me was like, oh, fuck yeah. Also, look at his fit. It goes hard as fuck. So when I showed my dad, he was like, "Are you sure?" Uh-huh. So he buys it for me, drive all the way home, and then I just dive right into issue 1, which is where we will be starting our story off. Issue 1, The Crucible. The first issue starts off with a man that we will learn to be known as Thaddeus Bach being attacked by a bunch of different aliens. And if the first line that he says seems a little Miranda rightsy, I think that's on purpose, because we soon learn that Thaddeus is a peacekeeper, which is basically like a space cop. And he's such a good peacekeeper that he's about to be promoted to an elite peacekeeper. And we learn that by him speaking to his pregnant wife, Alua. Oh god. He has a pregnant wife? In an origin story? Oh my god. Shortly after his promotion, Thaddeus was invited into a group called the Wrath by his commanding officer, Temple. So the Wrath is basically a task force that takes on missions that are practically impossible. And we're not talking about like Suicide Squad levels of impossibility where like most of them survive. I'm talking about like only one person survives, and that one person is usually Temple. So you could probably understand why Thaddeus isn't so gung-ho about joining this team when he's got a kid on the way. But eventually he does accept the offer and he meets his teammates, Cutter, Smith, and Hammer. And then on his first mission with these guys, he realizes that these guys, they're kind of monsters. They started killing criminals out of nowhere and then start coming up with a cover-up story so that they can get away with their heinous acts. After seeing everything that happened, Thaddeus thought to himself, maybe I don't want to be a part of this team anymore. And he starts to question Temple about his morals. But Temple says, "You just got too much heart in you, kid. It'll pass." But Thaddeus was like, "Nah, dog, I can't handle this. We gotta go." So he decides he wants to go home and tell his wife that they gotta pack up their stuff because they're leaving. But unfortunately, Thaddeus was followed home. They knock out Thaddeus, and when he wakes up, he's obviously wondering, where's his wife? And, well, things are looking a little bit grim. After finding this out, Thaddeus is understandably pissed, so he starts attacking everybody, but then he gets shot by Temple, and that is where the issue ends. And jumping right into issue 2, The Purge. When Thaddeus wakes up, he finds out that he's on a barren planet, but he was saved by an alien named Solomon, who nurses him back to health. For the next year, Solomon and Thaddeus stay on that planet together, working together to survive. And Thaddeus, he's so depressed, dude. Oh my god. And on the 1-year anniversary of when Thaddeus' child would have been born, Solomon comes up to him and wants to start a conversation with him. Solomon says that he can tell that Thaddeus is a good person. So he says that he doesn't deserve to be on the planet and that he deserves to be able to go home and start a new life. He takes him to this complex that has a spaceship and a whole cool arsenal. And this is where Thaddeus finally gets his iconic armband and belt that gives him his power. And you're probably wondering, what are Space Ghost's powers? Well, guess what? Your comic book concierge is right here to answer that question for you. You see, his armbands give him a multitude of ray blasts. His belt allows him to go invisible and intangible, so he can go walk through walls, disappear, and fly. I don't know which garment of clothing lets him fly, but he can just fly now. Also, his red and white suit allows him to have super durability and super strength. And then we finally get to see him suited up with all of his glory. Space Ghost. And he's determined to get revenge no matter what Solomon says. Meanwhile, we see that the Wrath team sees signs of a bug invasion that they've been dreading their entire lives. And that is where issue 2 ends. Jumping right into issue 3, The Reprisal. The issue starts with Space Ghost absolutely jumping Hammer, shooting off his arm. And as Hammer is running for his life, he's calling for Temple for help. And before he can explain it, Hammer kind of just explodes, He runs towards a burning building, runs into the flames, and explodes. Temple, hearing Hammer's distress call, he sends Cutter out there to see what's going on with him. And when she shows up, Space Ghost gets a drop on her by hitting her with his ship. My guy is not playing around. Holy crap. Space Ghost and Cutter fight for a little bit, and when Cutter almost falls off the ship, he grabs her and he's like, "Tell me where Temple is." And she responds by kicking him in the face and falls off the ship to her death. After that, Space Ghost goes after Temple, but falls into a trap that Temple laid out for him. But Space Ghost springs back into action like immediately and grabs Temple. And when he's about to finish him off, the two are suddenly blasted away from each other from a huge explosion. And that's when we find out that the bug invasion has already begun. And who's leading this invasion, you may be asking? Well, it's none other than Zorak. You guys know who Zorak is, right? You guys watch Space Ghost Coast to Coast. Well, if you haven't because you're like 6, I'll put in a clip right here, my favorite clip from Space Ghost Coast to Coast.
Hey, Space Ghost, wanna hear a funny joke?
See, Moltar, this is what I'm talking about. Ugh. Quiet, Moltar. Your heat will throw off his timing, and that's why you suck.
Okay, here we go. Knock, knock.
Who's there?
You.
Magnificent. And that is where this issue ends. Jumping into issue number 4, Eclipse. And so you would think, with a whole invasion destroying this planet, Space Ghost would be like, maybe I should help people instead of try to kill this guy that I could probably try to kill later, right? Nope. He says, I'm out for revenge, and I don't care that this invasion is going on. So during the invasion, he's still chasing down Temple, and he's showing off his super sick moves that are impressing everybody. The ladies, the bugs, the temples, everyone, including myself. But Space Ghost's pursuit is cut short when an explosion sends him flying super far away. When Space Ghost lands and tries to come up with a new plan of attack, he hears screams for help. And when he goes to investigate, he sees that there's 2 children about to be eaten by these bug boys. Obviously, Space Ghost saves them, and we learn that these kids' names are Jace and Jan, which, if you don't know, are his sidekicks' names from the 1960s cartoon series. And Space Ghost, he's kind of like me, because he doesn't like them very much. You see, it starts getting dark, and they start making camp in a cave. And they start talking to each other, and he's a little bit more hostile than you would expect. And they annoyed him so much that he threatened to feed them to the bug people, which, dang bro, that's cold-blooded. You really gonna do them like that? Cutting to the next morning, the 3 of them start walking, and then they get attacked by more bug boys. After defeating them, Space Ghost starts flying the kids, which I don't know why he didn't do this from the jump, but he starts flying the kids towards their hometown. Before they could get to their hometown, it got dark again, so they set up camp for the night. And Jace calls Thaddeus Space Ghost, and Thaddeus is like, Space Ghost? And they explain to him that it's a story that their dad used to tell them that a faceless, mean spirit would come whenever the children would misbehave. To ease the kids' minds, he shows them his face, and it's actually quite a nice moment. He then reflects on how he's been treating these kids, which honestly, good for him, there's still a conscience in there. Meanwhile, this is happening. Temple was captured by the bugs and taken to Zorak. And Zorak starts questioning him about the man in white. And Temple finds out that Zorak is controlling all the bugs via a hive mind. After being questioned, Temple convinces Zorak that they can work together to take down Space Ghost. And that is where the issue ends. Jumping right into issue 5, Venom. The issue starts with Space Ghost finally returning the kids back to their hometown, and he lets them run off back home. But when he lands, he sees a bunch of villagers that are armed coming towards him, and he's like, oh shit. Space Ghost says that he's not with Temple, and he questions why they would ask that. And this is when the villagers show him a live feed of Zorak and Temple telling the entire planet to surrender to Zorak. But Space Ghost is like, nah, F that noise, where's this happening? And they tell him that it's coming from a central tower that's about 100 units away. But the villagers ask him not to go and help them protect their village. But Space Ghost is after that sweet, sweet revenge, so he says, bug off, bro. You get it? You see what I did there? Because they're bugs. But right before he leaves, Jace and Jan come out all teary-eyed. And it's very heavily implied that their parents are no longer with us. And Jace, he says, Space Ghost, can I have a hug? And Space Ghost says, Space Ghost actually, he refuses to hug this grieving child. And he says, nah, and he turns invisible and he flies away and he lets this child cry, bro. So anyway, Space Ghost flies to the central tower and he starts attacking the bugs, but then he starts to get a little bit overwhelmed and they start beating the absolute crap out of him. And while they're beating him, they tell Space Ghost that they know why he's after Temple. and they start mocking him about how he's never going to be able to avenge his dead wife and unborn child. And this really makes him mad, so he starts fighting back even harder, but then he gets stabbed. And in response to being stabbed, he explodes out with energy, killing all of the Bug Boys. Coming back to Temple, he confronts Zorak and says that he can see right through his plan. He knows that Zorak is planning on giving Temple over to Space Ghost so they can kill each other, and Zorak can continue to lay siege to the planet. And when Zorak finds this out, he locks up Temple and plans on killing him as day breaks. And then cutting back to Space Ghost, he has a vision of his dead wife, and she's basically like, "Yo, bro, that was a little cold-blooded. You should have hugged those kids. Now stop being a meanie butt and be a better person. Oh, I'm a ghost." Cutting to the next day, we see that Jason and Jan are in the treehouse talking to each other. But then they get ambushed by more bug people. And we see that the entire town has been overrun by the Bug Boys. But they are ultimately saved by Space Ghost coming back and saving the day. And he tells everybody to protect the kids as if they were their own. We then jump back onto Zorak's ship, and we see that Temple has cut off his hand so that he could escape. And then we see Space Ghost in his Phantom Cruiser flying to the final battle. And that is where the issue ends. And this is where we jump into the last issue of the comic book storyline, issue 6, Mortality. The issue starts with Space Ghost in a ship taking down a whole bunch of Bug Boys. Meanwhile, Temple is sneaking around taking out bugs with his cool new bug hand, looking for the power core, which he finds. Cutting back to Zorak and Space Ghost, Zorak asks Space Ghost why he chose to protect the kids instead of going after Temple. Because if he would have gone after Temple, his death would have actually meant something. As he says this, Space Ghost gets swarmed by a bunch of Bug Boys. But as Space Ghost gets overwhelmed, he taps his armband, which amplifies his strength, and he knocks all the Bug Boys off, and he just starts decimating the vessel that Zorak is inhabiting. He gets interrupted, however, by none other than Temple shooting at him with his spaceship. This is when Space Ghost traps Temple with a tether beam, and he says that this battle is bigger than the both of them. But then Zorak's ship starts exploding, and Temple explains that in a minute or two, so much land is about to explode. He's about to basically nuke this area just so he can have the plausible deniability saying that he and his crew was never there. And even though Space Ghost's equipment is running low on power, he decides that he wants to change his priorities. Thaddeus tells the autopilot on his Phantom Cruiser to also grab Zorak's ship. And then he flies up to the ship and he shoots the ground with max power so he can propel the ship into the atmosphere. And then the bomb goes off and he dies in a blaze of glory. Just kidding, he's still alive. He throws Temple onto the table and he's like, "Hey yo, I saved the day, I'm Space Ghost, send this nigga to jail." And then he returns back to the Ghost Planet with Jason Jan, and he sees Solomon, and they all live happily ever after. And that is where our story ends. And after rereading this for the script over and over again, I gotta say, this story, it's just okay. But, I think there's kind of a beauty behind that, because it was the perfect story for me when I was just a kid, and it opened up a whole new world for me. I was able to join a cool community. I was able to make friends from it. I get to spend a lot more time with my parents. My dad used to take me to the comic book shop all the time, and my mom used to watch the Marvel movies with me, and she used to say that she hated them, but she would always be cheering in the theater, and but she would swear that she hates them, but it's okay. And just from this one story, it was able to bring a whole new aspect to my life that was enjoyable. And so that's why I love this story so much. And that's why if they're ever deciding to make a Space Ghost movie, I am available. I will get jacked. I do not care. Please contact me. This face is this face. Okay, I'm just saying. But that's all I got for you guys. If you guys like what you saw, make sure that you like, comment, subscribe so you don't miss out on any more Good to Go content. And if there's anything I could do better for the next storyline or another segment that I have planned that I haven't named yet, just let me know in the comments down below, and I will take heed. And I'll see you guys in the next video. And make sure you guys tell your family that you love them. See you later.